If the vet hadn't said those 4 words, she would never have understood. The Bernese Mountain Dog's name was Whisper, and he had been with the Miguel family for 3 years before Rosa stopped dismissing what he was doing. She was an occupational therapist. She thought this mattered. It would turn out that her professional knowledge was exactly what delayed her understanding. Miguel and Rosa had Tomas, who was 17 months and had recently learned to point at things as a method of requesting them. She pointed at Whisper constantly. He bore this with the patience of an animal who had already decided that Tomas was the most important thing in the building. The behavior started on a Wednesday. Nothing obvious. Whisper began positioning himself between Tomas and a specific area of the house. Not aggressively, not anxiously, simply with the calm, particular resolve of an animal executing a task that required no audience approval. He would stand there. He would wait. If Tomas moved toward the area, he moved with her. If she reached for something, he was already there. Rosa moved him the first time. He returned before she'd crossed the room. She moved him the second time with greater deliberateness. He returned in under 4 minutes. By the third day, she'd begun consulting her occupational therapist colleagues about canine resource guarding. The wrong question, arriving from the wrong framework, producing entirely wrong conclusions. Her expertise was the problem. She had a category for what she was observing. The category was incorrect. Miguel was less certain. He had no professional framework to apply, which meant he was watching what was actually happening instead of watching for confirmation of what he already thought was happening. He mentioned it to his brother. His brother said he'd heard of something like this. Miguel said he'd heard of it too. Neither of them said the thing out loud because it sounded like the kind of thing you didn't say until you had proof. On the 7th night, Rosa sat on the kitchen floor at 11 p.m. with her back against the refrigerator, watching Whisper maintain his position near the area he'd been attending to all week. She had a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. She had her phone with the browser open to a veterinary behavior website she wasn't reading. She was watching the dog. He turned and looked at her once, directly, the kind of look that carries information. Then he turned back. 2 days later, the thing happened. The details are specific, which is why they matter. Whisper began a behavior he had never exhibited in 3 years. He moved from his position and pressed himself against Miguel's legs repeatedly, in the direction of the phone that was sitting on the counter. Miguel reached for it. Whisper continued pressing toward it. Miguel called the number he needed to call. What the HVAC technician found was carbon monoxide from the furnace. The HVAC technician explained the science afterward. Dogs can detect a cracked heat exchanger, releasing combustion gases. The window between detectable and symptomatic, in this specific case, was the window in which Whisper had been standing in exactly that spot, in exactly that position, for exactly that many days. The levels in that nursery were already twice the safe threshold, the HVAC technician said. Rosa wrote it down, not because she needed to. She would remember it without writing, but because she needed to do something with her hands in that moment. She had a category now. The category was, I had a professional framework that was wrong. The dog had no professional framework and was right. This is not an abstract thing. The family went through the math together later. The number of days, the progression of what had been building, the window they'd had. Whisper had started attending to the situation before any instrument would have detected it, before any symptom would have been visible, before any human sense would have registered anything as wrong. He was working from a different data set. The family modified the house. They had the inspection. They followed the protocol. They thanked everyone they were supposed to thank. What they couldn't do was fully account for Whisper's contribution in any of the official paperwork. There wasn't a field for it. There isn't a field for it. The HVAC technician put early detection in the report. Early detection is accurate. It is also incomplete. Rosa sits differently on the kitchen floor now, differently than she sat in the beginning of this story. Lower, more settled, with Whisper beside her, instead of across the room from her. She had 20 years of professional training. She had a dog who'd been paying attention to things she didn't have instruments to measure. She doesn't say she was wrong. She says she was working with incomplete data. Whisper has no opinion on the distinction. He is busy attending to Tomas, who is 17 months and has recently learned that pointing at the dog works somewhat better than pointing at most other things. He is patient with her about it. He has always been patient. Has your dog ever done something that didn't make sense until suddenly it did? Tell us in the comments. Subscribe so the next story finds you before the noise does. She told her sister about it 6 weeks later, over the phone, in the specific way you tell a story when you're still not entirely sure the words are adequate to the thing that happened. Her sister listened to the whole thing without interrupting. Then she said, "I believe you. I believed dogs could do this before you told me." That's the thing about these stories. The people who need convincing are rarely the ones who end up in them.